Me, Seth. 28. Got a decent job, my own place, mind my own business, be not me, Christine. 27. My girlfriend of almost 2 years. When we met, she was cool, funny, smart, had her own interests. We clicked pretty fast. The first 6 months were probably the best I'd had in a long time. Then something started to shift. She got way more into online stuff, reading articles and forums all day. At first, I didn't think much of it. Everyone's got a hobby, but her new hobby was deconstructing every single aspect of our lives through a weird, angry lens. Every conversation started feeling like a test I was doomed to fail. It wasn't a sudden change, more like a slow leak. A drip, drip, drip of poison until the whole reservoir was tainted. It started with small things. We'd be watching a movie, some old action flick from my childhood. I'd be enjoying it, just turning my brain off for a bit. She'd pause it halfway through. Do you see the problematic power dynamics at play here? I just want to watch the explosions. She'd launch into a full-blown analysis of how the male protagonist's stoicism is a direct result of toxic masculinity, forcing him to repress his emotions, which in turn perpetuates harm. The female lead was never a character, just a trope or an object. I'd try to just agree to get the movie started again. Yeah, you're right, it's pretty old-fashioned. Wrong move? That was just the opening she needed. It's not just old-fashioned, Seth. It's a foundational text for the kind of patriarchal attitudes that keep women in a subordinate position in society. And by consuming it uncritically, you're reinforcing those structures. My brain would just fizzle out. I just wanted to see if he'd defuse the bomb in time. This started happening with everything. Music, books, even the way I told a story about my day at work. If I mentioned a male colleague got a promotion, she'd ask if any qualified women were passed over. If I said a female colleague was having a tough time with a project, it was because she was likely dealing with a hostile, male-dominated work environment. Every single thing had to be filtered through this new ideology. Our apartment stopped feeling like a home. It felt like a gender studies classroom where I was the only and perpetually failing student. A few months back, things really started to escalate. I came home from work completely drained. It had been one of those days where everything that could go wrong did. All I wanted was to make a nice dinner and just be quiet for a while. I stopped at the store and bought a couple of nice steaks, a little treat. I walk in and Christine is on the couch, laptop glowing on her face as usual. I say hi, head to the kitchen, and start unpacking the groceries. She wanders in a few minutes later, looks at the counter, and just scoffs. A short, sharp, disappointed sound. "What's up?" I ask. She just points a finger at the steaks. "Seriously? Red meat?" I'm confused. She eats steak. We've had it together dozens of times. "Yeah? I thought we could have a nice dinner." She shakes her head like I'm a child who just doesn't get it. The meat industry is a cornerstone of patriarchal capitalism, Seth. It's built on domination, violence, and the exploitation of living beings. The very act of consuming a bloody piece of red meat is a performance of traditional, aggressive masculinity. I just stared at her. I honestly didn't know how to respond to that. It was a steak from the grocery store. I tried to be reasonable. "Okay, I didn't think of it like that. I just thought it would taste good. There's some chicken in the freezer if you'd rather have that." I thought that was a good compromise. Offer an alternative. De-escalate. She just sighed, a long, theatrical sigh. "You're missing the point. It's not about chicken versus steak. It's about the unexamined assumptions behind your choices. You just default to the thing that represents power and dominance because society has conditioned you to." She then walked out of the kitchen. I stood there for a full minute, holding a package of ribeye, feeling like the world's biggest moron. I ended up putting the steaks in the freezer and making pasta with tomato sauce. She didn't complain about the pasta, but she ate in silence, occasionally shaking her head to herself, like she was deeply disappointed in me. The entire meal was agony. The silence was louder than any argument. It was like that all the time. I'd try to do something helpful, something that I thought was just being a good partner. One evening, I noticed the trash was full. Kitchen, bathroom, all of it. No big deal. I gathered it all up, tied the bags, and took them out to the dumpster. I came back inside, washed my hands, and felt pretty good. A simple chore, done. Christine was watching me from the living room. She didn't look pleased. She looked suspicious. "What?" I asked. "I saw what you did," she said, her voice low. I was genuinely baffled. "I took out the trash?" "You made a big show of it," she said, "gathering it all, making sure I could see you doing it. You were performing domestic labor. I had no idea what that even meant. I was just taking out the trash because it was full." She shook her head. "No, men do that. They perform a single visible chore so they can then use it as a shield against any accusations of not contributing. It's a way of saying, 'See, I helped,' while ignoring the vast, invisible mental load that women carry every day, planning meals, tracking appointments, remembering birthdays. I literally couldn't win. If I didn't take out the trash, I was a lazy slob relying on her labor. If I did take out the trash, I was a manipulative performer of chores, seeking praise for the bare minimum. I tried to explain that my thought process was simply, 1, trash is full. 2, trash should be empty. 3, I will take it out. She told me that was a simplistic male way of thinking that ignored the complex social subtext of domestic actions. I just gave up. I went into our bedroom and read a book. There was no point in even trying to have a conversation. The worst part was how it infected our social life, or what was left of it. We got invited to a friend's barbecue one weekend. I was looking forward to it. Just a chill afternoon, hanging out with people, not having to think too hard. We get there, and it's a typical backyard party. The guys are gathered around the grill, talking about sports or cars or whatever. The women are sitting at a table nearby, chatting. A totally normal, self-selected social grouping. Nobody was forced. I walked over to the grill to say hi to the host. Christine stayed back, arms crossed, surveying the scene like an anthropologist studying a primitive tribe. A few minutes later, she came over and pulled me aside. Her eyes were blazing. "I can't believe this. It's like a parody." "What's a parody?" "This! Look at it!" she hissed, gesturing around the yard. The men are clustered around the fire, the primal source of heat and cooking, performing their provider roles. The women are relegated to the side, forced into passive social roles. This is gender segregation in its most blatant form. I looked around. The women were laughing and drinking wine. The guys were laughing and drinking beer. Everyone seemed to be having a good time. "I think people are just talking to their friends," I said. "That's because you're blind to the systemic forces that shape these interactions, Seth. You see it as just talking, but it's a microcosm of the entire patriarchal structure. It's depressing." She was so miserable, and her misery was like a black hole, sucking all the fun out of the afternoon. We left early. She insisted. In the car on the way home, she explained to me that by participating in the grill circle, I was complicit in the marginalization of the women at the party. I hadn't even said 10 words. I just said, "Hey man, smells good," to the host. But in her mind, I had helped reinforce the glass wall of the patriarchy. I just drove and listened, nodding along. Arguing was pointless. It was like arguing with a radio broadcast. The signals only went one way. I started to withdraw. It was easier to just not do things, not say things, not have opinions. I stopped suggesting movies or restaurants. I let her choose every time. I stopped telling her about my day, keeping my answers vague and short. I did my share of the chores silently, hoping not to be noticed. If I was noticed, it would be analyzed. I was becoming a ghost in my own life. I was constantly on edge, playing a never-ending game of mental chess, trying to anticipate what normal, everyday thing would be the next ideological crime. Paying for dinner? That was me infantilizing her and flaunting my financial power, letting her pay. I was subverting her desire to be treated, forcing her into a masculine provider role. Splitting the bill? A cold, transactional approach to romance, stripping it of all warmth and replacing it with a sterile accounting. There was no right answer. The system was designed for my failure. I felt this constant low-grade exhaustion. The mental energy it took to just exist around her was immense. I was always tired. I was losing weight. I wasn't sleeping well. I knew this wasn't sustainable, but I didn't know what to do. I still remembered the person she used to be, and I kept hoping I'd catch a glimpse of her again. But that person was buried deeper and deeper every day under layers of jargon and resentment. Then came the breaking point. It wasn't some huge dramatic event. It never is. It was the smallest, stupidest, most insignificant thing. It was a Saturday morning. A few weeks ago, maybe a month now. The weather was just starting to get nice. We were both off work. I woke up first and wanted to make some coffee. I realized we were out of milk. Christine was still in bed, scrolling on her phone. I popped my head into the bedroom. "Hey, I'm running to the store to get some milk for coffee. Need anything else?" She didn't look up from her screen. "Just get the oat milk, the usual one." Her tone was flat, like I should have known not to even ask. "All right, be back in a bit." I drove to the little grocery store down the street. I went to the dairy aisle, but the spot where the oat milk usually was empty. Just a blank space on the shelf. They were all out. I checked around, asked an employee. "Nope, truck was late, no oat milk today." "Okay, no problem. I'll get an alternative." I looked at the other options: soy, coconut, almond. I remembered Christine mentioning she liked almond milk lattes a while back. Seemed like a safe bet. I grabbed a carton of almond milk, paid, and drove home, thinking nothing of it. I walked in the door, put the small bag on the kitchen counter. "Got the milk," I called out. She came out of the bedroom yawning. She looked into the bag and her face just collapsed. It went from sleepy to thunderous in a split second. "What is this?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. I was confused. "It's almond milk. They were all out of oat." She picked up the carton and held it like it was radioactive. "Did you do this on purpose?" My blood ran cold. This was the tone she used when she was gearing up for a fight. "What?" "No, they were out of oat milk. The shelf was empty. I figured this was the next best thing." She slammed the carton down on the counter. "The next best thing? The next best thing? Seth, do you have any idea about the environmental impact of the almond industry? The insane amount of water it takes to grow almonds, especially in drought-stricken areas? The exploitation of honeybees required for pollination?" I had no idea what she was talking about. It was breakfast. No, I just thought you'd want some kind of milk for your coffee." "That's the problem," she yelled, her voice rising. "You don't think, you just act, driven by your own convenience with zero regard for the ethical implications of your consumption. You knew I get oat milk for specific ethical reasons, and you chose to completely disregard that because it was easier for you to just grab the next carton you saw." I tried to defend myself. "That's not fair. I tried to get what you wanted. It wasn't there. I made a choice based on what I thought you liked. I was trying to do something nice." "Nice? This isn't nice. This is a passive-aggressive slap in the face. It's you telling me that my values, my beliefs don't matter, that your need for a quick, thoughtless solution is more important than my deeply held convictions." She was pacing back and forth in the kitchen now. I was standing there, by the door, still holding my car keys, and as she ranted about water tables and bee colony collapse and my inherent male privilege that blinded me to the suffering of the planet, something inside me just went quiet. The usual panic and frustration weren't there. The frantic need to defend myself, to explain, to make her understand, it was gone. In its place was a sudden, crystal-clear realization. It hit me like a physical blow. It's not about the milk. It was never about the steak, or the trash, or the movies. She wasn't angry because I bought the wrong milk. She was using the milk to create the anger she needed. The conflict wasn't a byproduct of our problems. The conflict was the entire point. My reaction, my apologies, my explanations, my frustration, that was her reward. It was the fuel. It proved her theories right. It made her feel powerful and righteous. The whole relationship for her had become a perpetual motion machine of grievance, powered by my emotional responses. And I suddenly saw, with blinding clarity, the only thing I could do. I had to take away the fuel. She was still talking, her voice just a roaring sound in my ears now. I didn't say a word. I turned around, I walked out the door, got in my car, and just drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to be away from that noise. I ended up at a park overlooking the city. I parked the car, turned off the engine, and just sat there in complete silence for hours. I watched people walk their dogs, kids playing, normal life, and I made a decision. The game was over. I wasn't playing anymore. I was going to become a gray rock, a boring, inanimate object. No emotion, no reaction, no fuel. I didn't know what would happen, but I knew, for the first time in a very long time, that what I was doing before was a guaranteed path to losing my mind. I took a deep breath. The air felt clean. It was time to go home and start the experiment. I got back to the apartment later that afternoon. The sun was starting to set. I'd been gone for at least 4 or 5 hours. My phone had a few missed calls and a string of angry texts from her, but I hadn't looked at them. I walked in, and the apartment was quiet. She was sitting on the couch, arms crossed, staring at the blank TV screen. She'd been waiting for me. The carton of almond milk was still sitting on the kitchen counter, like a piece of evidence at a crime scene. As soon as I closed the door, she was on her feet. "Where have you been? You just walk out in the middle of a conversation? That's unbelievably childish." This was the first test. The old me would have apologized for leaving, then tried to explain why I was so frustrated, which would have started the whole argument all over again. The new me took a deep breath. I looked at her, kept my face completely neutral. "I went for a drive," I said. My voice was calm and even, no anger, no defensiveness, just a statement of fact. Her face tightened. This wasn't the response she was expecting. She was expecting a fight, or at least a guilty explanation. "You went for a drive," she repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "While I was here, upset, trying to have a serious discussion about respect in our relationship." "Okay," I said, just that. "Okay." I walked past her, went into the kitchen, picked up the almond milk, and put it in the fridge. Then I got a glass of water. She followed me, standing in the doorway of the kitchen. She looked like a predator who couldn't figure out why her prey wasn't running. "Okay, that's all you have to say? Okay?" "There's nothing else to say," I replied, still calm. "You were upset about the milk, I understand." I wasn't being sarcastic. I was just being flat. A human wall. "You don't understand," she shot back, her voice getting louder. "If you understood, you'd be apologizing for your thoughtless behavior and for storming out like a child." "I'm not going to argue about it," I said. I took a sip of water. I felt strangely calm. It was like I was watching a movie of my own life. I was detached. She just stared at me, her mouth slightly open. She was completely flustered. The argument script in her head had 100 different branches, but all of them required my participation. My silence had broken the program. She sputtered for a moment, then turned and stomped back to the living room. I finished my water, went into our bedroom, and just sat on the bed for a while. It was working. The silence was more powerful than any argument I could ever make. The next few days were weird. It was like living with a ghost who was trying to haunt me, but I refused to be scared. She tried every tactic in her book to get a reaction. Phase 1 was direct confrontation. She would bring up old arguments, things from months ago that I thought were long dead and buried. "Remember that time at my parents' house when you made that joke about my mom's cooking? That was a microaggression, you know. You were undermining the matriarch in her own domestic space." I just looked up from the book I was reading. "I remember," I said, then looked back down at the page. No apology, no defense. Just an acknowledgement of the memory. It drove her insane. She needed me to say, "No, it wasn't like that," so she could then explain why it was like that. My simple agreement gave her nowhere to go. The conversational door was slammed in her face. She tried to criticize my habits. "You spend so much time playing video games. It's just escapism. You're retreating into a digital world where you can live out power fantasies instead of engaging with the complexities of the real world." My response, "You're right, it is escapism." I didn't even try to justify it. I just owned it. She would stand there, waiting for more, for the but that never came. Her frustration was palpable. It was like a static charge in the air. When direct confrontation failed, she moved on to phase 2. Passive aggression and baiting. She started leaving articles open on her laptop, positioned on the coffee table so I couldn't miss them. Headlines like, "10 signs your partner is a narcissistic gaslighter," or "How to spot emotional unavailability in men." I'd see them, and I'd just walk by. I never mentioned them. She would sigh loudly whenever I entered a room. Big, dramatic, long-suffering sighs. I acted like I didn't hear them. She'd accidentally say things on the phone with her friends, making sure she was loud enough for me to hear from the other room. "No, he's just, I don't know. He's been so cold lately. It's like living with a stranger. It's a form of punishment, I think. Stonewalling, you know?" I'd just turned the page of my book. It was hard. Part of me, the old me, wanted to storm in there and say, "I'm not stonewalling you, I'm just tired of fighting." But I knew that was exactly what she wanted. That outburst would be her victory. It would prove her right. So I stayed quiet. I let her spin her narrative. The peace and quiet in my own head was worth more than winning an argument she was having with someone else. One night, she tried a new approach. We were getting ready for bed. I was brushing my teeth, and she came and stood in the bathroom doorway. "You know," she began, her voice softer, more reasonable. "This silence isn't healthy. Healthy couples communicate. They talk through their problems. By refusing to engage, you're damaging our relationship." I rinsed my mouth, put my toothbrush away. I looked at her. "We've done a lot of talking," I said, my voice still even. "The talking always ends with you telling me what I did wrong and me apologizing. I'm just skipping to the end." The mask of concern on her face slipped for a second, replaced by a flash of pure anger. "That is so unfair," she snapped. "I'm not just telling you what you did wrong. I'm trying to educate you. I'm trying to help you be a better person, a better partner. It's emotional labor, and it's exhausting, and you're not even grateful." "I don't want to be educated," I said. "I just want to be at peace in my own home." I walked past her and got into bed. She stood there for a long time before turning off the light. The bed felt like a massive empty continent between us. The weekend came, and things got even stranger. She seemed to realize that her usual methods were failing, so she tried to pretend like everything was normal. "Hey, do you want to go to that new cafe we saw downtown?" she asked on Saturday morning, her voice bright and cheerful. It was a trap. I knew it. The cafe would be a public space where she could perform the role of the aggrieved girlfriend. She'd find something to be upset about. The gendered language on the menu, the lack of diverse representation among the staff, anything. And if I said no, then I was the one being difficult and antisocial. "No thanks," I said. "I've got some things to do around here." "Like what?" she pressed. "Just some tidying up, reading, relaxing." Her cheerful facade crumbled. "So you'd rather stay here, in silence, than spend time with your girlfriend?" "I'd rather have a quiet day at home, yes," I said, not taking the bait. I wasn't attacking her, I was just stating my preference. It was infuriating for her, because it was unassailable. I wasn't saying, "I don't want to go with you." I was saying, "I want to stay here." She ended up going by herself, slamming the door on her way out. I spent the afternoon in the most profound peace I had felt in months. The apartment was silent. I read a book. I listened to music. I didn't have to watch what I said or did. I felt my shoulders, which I hadn't realized were permanently tensed up around my ears, finally relax. I felt like myself again. When she got back a few hours later, she was carrying a bag from the cafe and a thunderous expression. She didn't say anything to me, just went straight to the bedroom, the silent treatment. It was ironic. She was trying to punish me with the very thing I had discovered was a blessing. The dynamic in the apartment had completely flipped. For 2 years, I had been the one tiptoeing around her, desperate to please, terrified of saying the wrong thing. I was the one who was constantly anxious, trying to read her moods, trying to anticipate the next explosion. Now, she was the one on edge. She was watching me constantly, trying to figure me out. My calmness, my lack of reaction, was a mystery she couldn't solve. It was a form of power I never knew I had. Not the power to control her, but the power to control myself. The power to deny her control over my emotional state. She had built a whole castle of righteous indignation, and I had simply walked away from it. I refused to be the dragon she needed to slay to feel like a hero. The castle was still there, but without a dragon, it was just a pile of rocks. This led to the final phase before the big meltdown, the emotional appeal. One evening, I was in the kitchen making myself a sandwich. She came in and stood there, looking uncharacteristically vulnerable. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying. "Seth," she said, her voice small and shaky. "Can we please just talk? For real?" The old me would have melted. My instinct has always been to fix things, to comfort people. But I knew this was just another tactic, a more sophisticated one, but a tactic nonetheless. I kept making my sandwich. "What do you want to talk about?" "About us," she said, and a tear rolled down her cheek. "I feel so disconnected from you. I miss you. I miss us. What happened? Why are you being like this?" She was trying to activate my empathy, to make me feel guilty for her sadness. "Nothing happened," I said, putting the lettuce on my sandwich. "I'm right here." "No, you're not. You're a million miles away. You're treating me like I don't matter. It hurts so much. I put the top piece of bread on my sandwich, pressed it down gently, and picked it up. I turned to face her, holding my plate. Do you think I enjoyed our conversations before? I asked, a genuine question. She was taken aback. What do you mean? Our talks. Do you think I felt good during them? Do you think I felt heard, or respected, or loved? She stared at me, and for the first time, she looked genuinely uncertain. She had no prepared speech for this. I was just trying to be honest. I was sharing my perspective. Your perspective, I said, nodding slowly, is that I am always wrong, that my instincts, my choices, my very way of being in the world is fundamentally flawed and in need of constant correction from you. Every conversation was a lecture. Every interaction was a test. I failed every single time. After 2 years of that, a person gets tired. I wasn't angry. I was just stating the facts as I saw them. So this is revenge, she whispered, her eyes wide. You're punishing me? I shook my head. This isn't punishment, Christine. This is retirement. I walked out of the kitchen, went to the living room, and turned on the TV, leaving her standing there alone. I could feel it. The end was near. She had run out of moves. All she had left was raw, unfiltered emotion. And I knew, with a sinking feeling, that it was going to be ugly. I ate my sandwich and watched some dumb comedy show, but I wasn't really paying attention. I was just waiting for the final storm to break. The storm broke 2 days later. It was a weekday evening. I had just gotten home from work. The whole week had been filled with this heavy, oppressive tension. Christine was barely speaking, but it wasn't the peaceful silence I had cultivated. It was a loaded, angry silence. A silence that was waiting to explode. I had a gym bag packed. I'd started going to the gym more often, partly to get in better shape, but mostly just to get out of the apartment. It was my neutral corner. I walked in, dropped my work bag, and started to head for the bedroom to change. She was on the couch, but this time she wasn't on her laptop. She was just sitting there, staring at the wall. As I walked past, she spoke, her voice eerily calm. Where are you going? To the gym, I said, not breaking my stride. No, she said. I stopped and turned. No? No, she repeated, standing up. You're not going anywhere. We are going to sit down, and we are going to talk about this until it is solved. You don't get to just run away to the gym. She came and stood between me and the bedroom door. She was physically blocking my path. This was new. There's nothing to solve, Christine, I said, keeping my voice low. We've said everything that needs to be said. No, I've said things. You've just been sitting there like a lump with your smug, silent judgment. Now you're going to talk. You're going to tell me what is going on in that head of yours. I don't want to, I said simply. I'm going to the gym. Please move. That's when she lost it. It wasn't a gradual crescendo. It was a switch being flipped. All the frustration, the confusion, the rage she had been bottling up for a week came pouring out. I don't want to, she shrieked, her voice cracking. You don't get a choice. I have spent 2 years trying to help you. 2 years of my life. I've been patient. I've explained things to you 1,000 times. I've done the emotional labor for this entire relationship. She was starting to pace, her movements sharp and jerky. And this is how you repay me? By shutting down? By giving me the silent treatment like some kind of petulant child? Do you have any idea how abusive that is? This is psychological warfare, Seth. This is gaslighting. You're trying to make me feel like I'm the crazy one. I just stood there, my gym bag in my hand. My heart was pounding, but on the outside, I remained perfectly still. I was the rock in the middle of her hurricane. My silence was making it worse, and I knew it. She was desperate for a reaction, for me to yell back, to engage. Say something, she screamed, her face turning red. She was right in front of me now, jabbing her finger towards my chest. Defend yourself! Yell at me! Do something! Don't you just stand there like a coward. I'm not going to yell at you, Christine, I said, and my voice was so quiet it seemed to make her even angrier. Of course you won't, she wailed, because then you'd have to actually feel something. You're just empty inside. You're a shell, a hollow man. All that nice guy stuff is just an act, isn't it? Underneath it all, you're just cold and cruel and unfeeling. She was starting to sob now, but they were angry, frustrated tears. She looked around wildly, saw a throw pillow on the couch, grabbed it, and hurled it at the wall. It hit with a soft thud. "I hate you!" she screamed. "I hate what you're doing to me. You've become this monster, this passive-aggressive monster." And that was it. That was the moment of absolute clarity for me. After 2 years of being told that everything I did was a form of aggression, my jokes, my hobbies, my way of speaking, even the food I ate, now my silence was the ultimate act of aggression. There was nothing I could do that wouldn't be wrong. My very existence in her life was the problem. The whole thing was a perfectly designed, self-sealing trap. I looked at her, this screaming, crying person in front of me. I didn't see the woman I used to know. I didn't see the activist or the intellectual. I just saw a deeply unhappy person who had made a prison of her own ideology and was now trying to burn it down with me inside it. A strange sense of calm washed over me, not detachment this time, but a profound sense of finality. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, no sadness, just a quiet, settled emptiness. It was over. I gently sidestepped her. I walked around her as she stood there, sobbing and panting. I didn't go to the bedroom for my gym clothes. I walked straight to the front door, opened it, and walked out. I didn't slam it, I just closed it quietly behind me. I went to the gym. I had the best workout I'd had in a year. I put on my headphones, turned the music up loud, and just lifted. For that hour, my mind was completely blank. There was only the weight, the effort, the burn. It was simple. It was real. When I was done, I sat in my car in the gym parking lot for a while. I knew I couldn't go back to the apartment. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. I drove to a cheap motel on the other side of town, paid for one night in cash. The room was sterile and smelled like disinfectant, but it was the most peaceful place I'd been in a long, long time. It was just me. My thoughts were my own. There was no one there to analyze them, to judge them, to tell me they were wrong. I slept for 10 hours straight. A deep, dreamless sleep. The next morning, I knew what I had to do. I found a friend who I knew would be at work and would have a spare key hidden. I let myself into his place and left him a note and some cash on the counter. Then I drove back to my apartment. It was the middle of the day, so I was pretty sure she'd be out. Her car was gone. Good. I let myself in. The apartment was still and silent. The pillow she had thrown was still on the floor. I went into the bedroom. I took my biggest duffel bag and a couple of trash bags. I didn't pack everything. I just packed the essentials. Clothes, my laptop, my documents, a few books that meant something to me. I was methodical. I didn't rush. It felt like I was cleaning up after someone else's life. As I was zipping up the last bag, I saw a picture frame on the nightstand. It was of the two of us from that first year. We were on a hike, smiling. We both looked so happy, so normal. I stared at it for a long moment. I felt a brief pang of something, sadness maybe, a ghost of what we used to have. But it was like remembering a character from a movie I saw a long time ago. It didn't feel like my life anymore. I left the picture there. I carried my bags out to my car. It took 3 trips. On the last trip, I stopped in the living room. I took my key off my keychain. I placed it on the coffee table, right next to where she always left her laptop. I looked around the apartment one last time. It was just a place, a collection of stuff. It had no power over me anymore. I walked out and closed the door behind me. I didn't lock it. It wasn't my door anymore. Later that day, she started calling, texting, a storm of messages. First, angry. "Where are you? You took your stuff? You're just leaving? Like a coward?" Then pleading. "Seth, please come back. We can fix this. I was just upset. I didn't mean it." Then came the apologies. "I know I've been difficult. I'll change. I'll go to therapy. Just please don't throw this away." I didn't reply to any of them. There was nothing to say. You can't fix a foundation that was built on a flawed premise. Her premise was that I was a problem to be solved. My premise was that I was a person to be loved. Those two things can't exist in the same space. It's been a few months now. I found a new place. It's smaller, but it's mine. It's quiet. I blocked her number after a few weeks. I heard through a mutual friend that she's telling everyone I had some kind of breakdown, that I became emotionally abusive and abandoned her. I'm sure in her story, she's the victim. She has to be. Her whole worldview depends on it. And you know what? I don't care. Let her have her story. I'm not a character in it anymore. I don't know what the future looks like. I'm not really thinking about dating. I'm just enjoying the silence, the freedom of not having to justify my own existence every single minute of the day. The lesson, I guess, is that some battles can't be won. You can't reason someone out of a position they didn't reason themselves into. Sometimes the only move left is not to play. Just drop the controller and walk away. And it feels pretty damn good.